and then they would be all covered up in blankets and wool and all this stuff. And so he said, no, 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 just put them through between two sheets. Make sure there's no draft in the room. And you can give them a little bit of tepid water, not cold water, not hot water, just some tepid water. You need to feed them water because their body is cleansing itself. It's an automatic cleansing system, fevers, yeah? And water is going to flush it out, right? You want to take water in and get the wastes out. So so I don't know. He's got some interesting stories in that book all about fever. So, again, fever is your friend. This guy, I mean, there's this New York clinic, and they don't take you all the way up to 108 degrees. I think they play around 104, 105. Interesting story. I had my daughter. She was, oh gosh, 2 at the time, I believe. And I was working, and I had a friend that took care of her, and she was a registered nurse. And she said she's got a horrible fever. She called me at work, so I came to go see. And she said, I would take her to the hospital, of course, but I know you're different. So she's like, I don't want to watch her. This is such a high fever. I'm not willing to watch her because if you're not willing to take her to the doctor, I don't want to take responsibility. Totally understood her position. So I took off work and took my little girl home, and I just did basically what Jethro Kloss in his Back to Eden book told me to do. And I don't know, maybe it was a mistake, but I bought one of those little thermometers so I could measure her temperature. And I did not know that at 108 degrees that would not hurt healthy cells. I was still of the paradigm that 105, 106, you're going to burn your brain out. Okay, so I bought this thermometer, a little electronic thermometer, and I was constantly taking her temperature, and it was way up there, up in the 105s, 106s. And it was a terrifying experience for me. And I remember finding, looking through the yellow pages, I was living in quite a wonderful little enlightened city at the time, Sarasota, Florida, and all kinds of natural doctors. There was one that, struck my eye. I called. He was like on vacation or something, so I couldn't go to him. I went to a chiropractor, and I told him, I said, can you recommend anybody that might be able to help me? Because, I was scared. She was, I looked at her, and she was totally coherent. She was just quiet. She'd sit and read her little books, and, so that I kept looking at that, and I was like, her brain seems perfectly fine to me, and I just remember reading, I don't know where I read it, but I remember that the reason most people die of fever is because of the complications of drugs administered during fever. And I remember thinking, because I was tempted, I was, like I said, I was nervous, I was scared. And I said to myself, if I take her into a hospital, I know what's going to happen. They're going to whisk her right out of my arms, and they're going to pump her up with some kind of medication. And if she dies because of that, I will never, ever forgive myself. And I said, because I know better. I know better than to turn to that for this, because I know that nature knows better. And I just hung on to, what Dr. Kloss did. And I just, kept monitoring her. And I could see that, she seemed fine. She was totally coherent, and she was just, kind of quiet and reserved. So anyway, I did at one point go to a chiropractor, and I asked him, do you know any natural, people that might be able to help me? And because I thought maybe there were some herbs or something I could give her. And he's like, what? You ought to get her to the hospital right away, And I thought, well, gosh, you don't even believe in what your own practice teaches. I mean, I know what chiropractic teaches. It certainly doesn't teach medication. So I thought, well, okay. Anyway, I went through about a week of this. I mean, she had a high fever for a week. And by the way, Mom, if you're listening, I never told you because I knew you would walk into the house and just whisk her out of the house and take her to the hospital. So I kept it from my family. Nobody knew. I just stayed home for a whole week from work and just monitored her. And I remember, there was one time I prayed and I just said, if you want to take her, I know she's yours, but, I'd really appreciate it if I could keep her. And I don't know, I went through a week of this, and I called my my babysitter, my friend, back up, and I told her, I said, well, she still has her fever. And she said, well, you've gone this long with her. Just go ahead and bring her back to me. You go to work. And so I went back to work. It was a Monday. And I got a call back at the afternoon, like lunchtime, from my babysitter, my friend. Her name also Hannah. And she said, good news, her fever broke, she's fine, and she's all bubbly again, and, it all turned out fine. But I remember just going through that, I don't know if you know about the politics of medicine, but essentially when you step onto hospital, at least in America, when you step onto hospital territory, you pretty much relinquish your rights because they have these serious insurance clauses, I guess, that make them responsible for anybody that walks onto their property. And if the person dies because they didn't do everything that they possibly could have done, then they're afraid of lawsuits. And so pretty much what you want no longer matters because they're trying to cover their own interests, right? So that's why, I just said, no, I would never forgive myself. And I knew they would pump her up with medicine. And I said, at this high fever, that is going to so complicate things that pretty much could just probably, push her right over the edge. So anyway, her body, for whatever reason, something in her body called for that fever. And now that now that I know so much more than I even did back then, I mean, I'm so, hey, I'm grateful for the fever. Now that I know that 108 degrees kills cancer cells and leaves healthy cells alone, and there are clinics actually doing this, artificially bringing about fevers, now I'm like totally fine with it. So I hope you can feel a little better about fevers yourself and not rush to bring the fever down. It's there for a purpose, okay? You got to trust that wisdom, that infinite wisdom, okay, that works through our bodies. Okay, how about morning sickness? I think I've already touched on this a couple times. Dr. B says morning sickness is a classic sign of dehydration. Okay, because your body, especially in the very beginning, right, it's got to build up all that amniotic fluid, right? So, and he says if you're feeling dizzy, just increase your water and of course make sure you got your salt minerals. Hey, I like to think of just like a farm or a garden, right? You want to throw those minerals, like we said, seaweed or the rock dust. Okay, we can't eat dust, so we can't get our minerals that way. We got to get it through plants. Think of your little baby as it's a little sprout. You want to feed it everything that it needs so that it can build a super strong body. Seaweed would be like the most awesome thing that you can supplement in your body to make sure your baby is properly fed and gets all the minerals it needs. Feed your baby all those good things, just like if you had a little garden and you wanted to feed it everything it wants. It wants water, it wants minerals. Give that to your baby so it can grow up to be really good and strong and get a great start. Okay, how about sexual dysfunction? Lubrication for women, what's the main component of that? It's going to be water, right? An erection is filled with fluid, yeah? Enough said. Dr. B says, drink a glass or a couple glasses of water before the big event, half an hour before the big event. Excuse me, sorry. All right, this is pretty obvious. Constipation. Again, it's sort of a lubrication issue, The more water you have, if it doesn't have to be squeezed out of the intestines or drawn out of the intestines for use in other parts of your body, it can go and remain as a lubricant so that you can pass your fecal matter easily. Okay. Dry eyes. Your tears in your eyes are made of what? Salt and water. Okay. Okay, I'll let you work that one out for yourself. That's pretty obvious. Oh, by the way, I was reading they have like little plugs that they put in the tear duct. That's got to be not a good thing to do, okay? I just know that can't be a good thing. I think there's healing in crying and you need to I don't know. Anyway, how about dry skin? Again, that's pretty obvious, right? This says here that the stratum corneum is a protective outer layer of the skin, and it has a normal water content of 30%. And if it's less than 10%, it's going to lead to dry skin, okay? Again, you can make that connection, right? Skin is not going to be as important as your brain. So if your body's having to go into some sort of water rationing program, things like joints and skin and stuff like that are going to suffer, at the expense of keeping you alive, okay? And by the way, dry skin, right, it's going to lead to more wrinkles. And it's interesting, he says that elderly people tend to, really lose their thirst sensation. And a cell is supposed to be, let's say, a nice plump cell, yeah? And he says the ratio of fluid inside a cell, in contrast to the fluid outside of the cell, should be like 1.1 to 1. So like for every 110 parts of fluid inside the cell, you'd only have 100 outside, right? It's pretty equal, but a little more inside the cell. It says in the elderly, that switches around, and it falls generally down to like 0.8 to 1, yeah? So now you've got saggy cells.